Welcome to the debate. To understand the Taylor Swift empire, to really understand it, you have to look at a single 4-chord guitar riff played in a 2011 tour rehearsal.
The famous sound check.
Right, exactly. Because that is the exact moment the music industry figured out how to, weaponize authentic human heartbreak. We are talking about a 21-year-old artist standing in this cavernous, empty arena during sound check, emotionally bleeding out over an ad-libbed melody.
Just playing the same chords over and over.
Yeah, while her backing band slowly figured out the rhythm and joined in. That wasn't a boardroom strategy session. It was a visceral, completely unfiltered purge of genuine devastation.
It is a beautifully romantic narrative. I'll give you that.
Because it's true. When you look at the genesis of All Too Well and, by extension, the DNA of the Red Album, it is undeniably a profound, vulnerable masterpiece of emotional processing. She was actively looking to Joni Mitchell's Blue for a blueprint on how to map a shattered soul.
Right, but
she was literally turning to the poetry of Pablo Neruda to make sense of a love that was chaotic and entirely out of control.
Okay, look, I'll grant you that the rehearsal moment actually happened. But to frame that spontaneous jam session as the defining ethos of Red completely ignores the industrial machinery waiting in the wings to package that exact moment.
How so?
Well, I come at it from a completely different way. That pure emotional purge didn't just drift into the ether, It was perfectly timed, meticulously polished, and deployed to fuel a marketing machine that generated 1.2 million first-week sales.
So massive success invalidates the art?
It was the fastest-selling album since Eminem's The Eminem Show a full decade earlier. That scale of absolute market domination does not happen by accident, and it certainly doesn't happen just because an artist was feeling sad.
No, it happens because the art resonated.
It happens because Red was a deliberate, data-driven pivot away from country music and straight into the mainstream pop jugular.
Look, I see why you look at those staggering sales figures and immediately see calculation. But you are intentionally conflating the scale of the distribution with the authenticity of the creation.
I don't think I am.
You are. The sheer size of the release doesn't retroactively negate the reality of what was happening in the recording studio. She wrote over 30 songs for this project, grappling with what she herself described as tumultuous, crazy adventures in love and loss.
Right, which is great PR copy.
It's life. When you experience a shattered relationship, when you are dealing with intense love, frustration, jealousy, and utter confusion, you don't process that in a single, neat, sonic aesthetic.
Right, but you do process it in a way that maximizes demographic reach if you're executing a corporate mandate to expand your global market share.
No, you process it in whatever medium can actually contain the emotion. Staying in acoustic country music to process this specific catastrophic breakup would be like trying to shoot a Michael Bay action sequence on a vintage Super 8 camera.
Oh, wow. A Michael Bay analogy?
Hear me out. The format simply couldn't hold the explosive scale of what she was trying to convey. She needed IMAX-level production.
Sure.
In 2012, electronic dance music and dubstep were capturing the chaotic, high-anxiety pulse of youth culture, reaching for the jarring dubstep bass drops in I Knew You Were Trouble, or the expansive U2-style arena rock guitars in State of Grace. It was an artistic necessity. She had to capture the full spectrum of her pain.
Okay, well, the Michael Bay analogy is actually brilliant, but not for the reason you think.
Elaborate.
Because how do you make a Michael Bay movie? You don't just wander out into the desert with a camera and pure intentions. You hire the most expensive, technically precise, heavily capitalized special effects studios on the planet.
That's not the point I was making.
But that is exactly the timeline here. The artist didn't just wander into a new sonic palette out of pure emotional necessity. The president of her label, Scott Borchetta, explicitly overheard the initial self-produced country-leaning tracks and essentially told her it wasn't broad enough to expand their market share.
He suggested pushing boundaries.
So what did she do? She didn't organically discover electronic vocal processing in a Nashville basement. She booked a flight to Los Angeles to hire Max Martin and Shellback.
And why shouldn't she? Working with Dan Wilson, Gary Lightbody, or Max Martin, those are collaborations naturally designed to push her own creative boundaries.
There is a massive difference between pushing boundaries and hiring the literal architects of the Swedish pop factory.
Oh, come on.
No, we have to define what Max Martin represents in the ecosystem of the music industry. Nashville country music, which is where her entire brand and credibility were built, is rooted in organic, linear storytelling, 3 chords and the truth.
Exactly.
Max Martin's approach is the absolute antithesis of that. It is algorithmic, mathematically precise pop music. It's called track and hook songwriting.
I know what track and hook is.
Right, where the track is built first by producers to maximize neurological engagement. The exact BPM, the exact frequency of the bass drop, and then the lyrics are retrofitted to perfectly match the rhythmic math of the melody.
That doesn't mean the lyrics are fake.
You don't bring in Max Martin to embark on a profound exploration of the soul. You bring him in to engineer a viral hook and conquer top 40 radio.
Okay, I'll admit that the Swedish pop methodology is inherently mathematical. I'm not denying that those tracks were designed to be incredibly catchy.
Thank you.
But utilizing pop architects does not erase the fact that she retained absolute narrative autonomy over those mathematically precise beats. She didn't just accept pre-written tracks.
She accepted the formula.
Working with Max Martin doesn't change the fact that she was the sole writer on 9 of the album's other tracks. And even on the co-written hits, the lyrics remain terrifyingly specific.
Oh, really? Is the spoken word bridge of "We are never ever getting back together" terrifyingly specific?
That's one part of one song.
Because to me it sounds like an audio clip engineered in a lab to go viral on Tumblr before virality was even a standardized industry metric.
That is one incredibly cynical way to look at it. But you are completely ignoring the crushing vulnerability of waiting for someone to show up to your 21st birthday party in The Moment I Knew.
Again, a great narrative.
Or the devastating permanence of leaving a scarf at your ex's sister's house, Maggie Gyllenhaal's house upstate, in All Too Well. She wasn't dealing in generic, algorithmic pop tropes. She was utilizing her own life with absolute precision.
That's certainly how it was sold to us.
Anyone listening to this who was in their early 20s in 2012 remembers exactly where they were when they first heard those lyrics, because the emotional core was undeniably real. She took the universal experience of heartbreak and pinned it to highly specific, tangible details. She basically shared her actual diary with her audience.
Look, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that.
You don't buy the lyrics?
It is genuinely fascinating how effectively you've internalized a brilliant public relations strategy as profound emotional intimacy. Because what you affectionately call an intimate diary, the music industry recognizes as weaponized lore.
Weaponized lore. Wow.
Yes, gamified marketing. The tabloid frenzy surrounding her high-profile relationships with Jake Gyllenhaal, Harry Styles, and Connor Kennedy wasn't some unfortunate, invasive side effect of her fame that she bravely overcame through art.
It absolutely was an invasion of privacy.
It was an active, heavily utilized corporate asset.
Are you suggesting that an artist writing about her lived experiences, which songwriters have done for centuries, by the way, is somehow a calculated PR stunt just because the public happens to know who the subjects are?
No, I'm saying that once the relationships ended, the specific details, the scarves, the maple lattes, the upstate houses, were strategically deployed to drive physical sales.
That makes no sense.
We have to look at the economic reality of the music industry in 2012. Piracy and early streaming models were absolutely decimating first-week sales across the board.
Right, the LimeWire era was ending. Spotify was starting.
Exactly. Big Machine Records realized you couldn't just sell a CD full of music anymore because fans could just torrent it for free in 5 minutes. You had to bundle it with an experience or a physical commodity that couldn't be illegally downloaded.
But the lyrics are the experience. The storytelling is what the fans were buying. They wanted to hear the rest of the narrative.
They were buying a puzzle. Look at the physical liner notes of the Red album.
The secret messages.
Yes. She capitalized specific, seemingly random letters within the lyric booklet to spell out secret messages. She spelled out "wrote this instead of calling" for the song I Almost Do.
Which is incredibly intimate.
She spelled out "SAG" for the title track, leaving a massive neon sign pointing directly towards Screen Actors Guild member Jake Gyllenhaal. You don't get those secret messages if you pirate the MP3s.
So she rewarded fans who bought the physical album.
You only get them if you physically go to a retail store like Target and purchase the physical CD booklet. Leaving a trail of breadcrumbs about an ex-boyfriend isn't just confessional art. It is a highly effective customer retention strategy.
A strategy?
Yes. The vulnerability you are so enamored with was simply the mechanism to put a hard paywall around the lore.
Okay, that's an interesting point about the physical media market, though I would frame it entirely differently.
I'm sure you would.
Because you're completely stripping the agency away from the audience. You're treating millions of fans as if they were just mindless consumers being tricked by a breadcrumb trail into buying a piece of plastic.
I'm not saying they were mindless, I'm saying they were heavily incentivized.
The strategy, if we are going to cynically call it a strategy, wouldn't work for a single second if the music didn't possess a profound emotional core. People don't buy a puzzle just to solve it if the picture they're putting together means absolutely nothing to them.
Well, they do if the media spectacle around the puzzle is loud enough. If every blog and magazine is trying to solve the riddle, Schumann curiosity takes over.
But the resonance lasted way beyond the media cycle of 2012. The reason Red defined a generation is because it spoke to the messy, non-linear reality of early 20s heartbreak.
It spoke to a demographic.
It wasn't tied up with a neat bow like the fairy tale endings of her earlier country work like Love Story or Mine. It was entirely unresolved. It was the crushing realization in a song like Sad, Beautiful, Tragic that sometimes a relationship doesn't end in a fiery explosion.
It just fades.
Right. It just quietly, painfully fades away. Even Pitchfork, a publication that historically ignored mainstream pop, ultimately gave the album a 9.0 rating.
Years later, yes.
They acknowledged her newfound patience and deeper exploration of emotion. It was an artist legitimately growing up, navigating the loss of her own innocence, and bringing her audience along for an incredibly difficult ride.
They were brought along for the ride through a meticulously orchestrated 4-week iTunes countdown campaign where a new song was dropped every single Tuesday to maximize pre-release hype.
So?
That is not an artist simply growing up in front of us. That is the flawless execution of a military campaign designed to monopolize the cultural conversation.
You can orchestrate a rollout without invalidating the soul of the album itself. The rollout matched the visual and thematic coming of age happening in the music.
The aesthetics.
She traded the princess gowns and sparkly guitars of the Speak Now era for a 60s fringe, Oxford shoes, a bold red lip, and a fiercely independent aesthetic. It was a genuine evolution of her identity.
An authentic, independent, coming-of-age aesthetic that just coincidentally happened to align perfectly with a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate sponsorship with Keds.
That's entirely separate.
Is it? Her newfound style was incredibly functional for selling branded sneakers. And that critical praise you referenced, the reason the album is so chaotic, hopping wildly from acoustic ballads to electronic dance beats, wasn't to organically mirror the messiness of a breakup.
It absolutely was.
It was a Frankenstein's monster of demographic straddling.
Wait, you're saying she compromised the sonic cohesion of the album just to appease different radio formats?
Explicitly. The track list was designed to keep the country radio stations appeased with acoustic, banjo-laced tracks like Begin Again, while simultaneously conquering top 40 pop radio with dubstep drops.
It was eclectic.
She even embedded a lyric from the band The Temper Trap into the song Treacherous, right as she was being publicly linked to Harry Styles, who notoriously had that exact lyric tattooed on his arm. You call it a brave, deeply personal coming-of-age story? I call it a brilliantly diversified portfolio designed to mitigate risk across multiple market sectors.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because a diversified portfolio doesn't inspire an entire subsequent wave of confessional indie pop.
Well, do you honestly think artists like Halsey, Olivia Rodrigo, or Conan Gray would exist in their current iterations without the blueprint of Red? It proved to the entire industry that young women's emotions weren't trivial. Teenage diary entries to be dismissed.
I'm not dismissing her emotions.
They were epic, Arita-worthy experiences that deserved serious production and critical respect. If you want to talk about scale, look at the legacy of the Red Tour itself.
Oh, I'd love to look at the economic legacy of the Red Tour.
You had 1.7 million fans filling stadiums across the globe. That wasn't just a concert series. It was a communal healing session.
A healing session, right?
Yes. It was 1.7 million people connecting over shared heartbreak, screaming the lyrics to All Too Well together. They were navigating that terrifying transition into adulthood as a collective. The stage design, the circus theme for We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, the carousel.
All very expensive props.
It all served to elevate her internal emotional landscape into a shared physical space. You simply cannot manufacture that kind of cultural resonance in a boardroom. The music had to possess a staggering emotional weight to anchor a movement of that magnitude.
A communal healing session that just happened to gross $150.2 million, making it the highest grossing country tour of all time.
People buy tickets to concerts. That's how live music works.
Let's cut through this profound romanticism and look at the aggressive corporate synergy that actually defined the Red era. Because while fans were supposedly healing in stadiums, they were being aggressively directed to Walgreens for exclusive merchandise pop-up stores.
Touring on a massive scale requires sponsorships and merchandising. The logistics of moving a stadium production globally are staggering. That's just the reality of executing a world tour. It doesn't dilute the art that's being performed on the stage. It's not just sponsorships, it's the fundamental commodification of the art itself. Fans were pushed to Target to buy the deluxe edition CD just to hear 6 extra tracks. They were sold Diet Coke and national television commercials that explicitly used the album's music. And let me give you my absolute favorite example of this era, the Papa John's pizza deal.
I knew you were going to bring up the pizza boxes.
How could I not? Let's talk about the psychological effect on the consumer here. For $22, a fan could buy a large one-topping pizza and the red CD delivered directly to their door in a customized 4-color box featuring Taylor Swift's face. It was a promotional tie-in.
Why did they do that? Because, as we established, you can't pirate a hot pizza. They circumvented the digital streaming collapse by turning her deeply personal diary into a side dish for fast food.
That is so reductive.
You are hungry, you order a pizza, and oh look, you accidentally just bought an album, counting toward her critical first-week Billboard numbers. Does that sound like the sacred distribution method of a vulnerable, intimate masterpiece?
It's just distribution.
The entire $150 million tour was a highly choreographed vehicle, heavily sponsored right down to the Air Asia tie-ins on the Southeast Asian leg. The art you're so fiercely defending was merely the packaging for a massive synergistic commercial product.
Okay, look, I'll grant you that the Papa John's deal is overtly, almost aggressively commercial. I am not denying the existence of the marketing team or the reality of selling physical CDs in 2012.
But
you cannot tell me that extreme commercial distribution retroactively invalidates the authentic pain and the artistic genius at the core of the record.
it doesn't invalidate it. It reveals exactly what its purpose was all along.
No, the purpose was expression. The Mona Lisa is printed on cheap coffee mugs, mouse pads, and canvas tote bags across the globe. Does that make Da Vinci a corporate sellout?
That is a wildly different historical context.
A masterpiece can be sold in a Papa John's pizza box and still remain a masterpiece. The corporate architecture you are so obsessed with, the Target exclusives, the Keds sponsorships, the pizza deals, that is merely the delivery mechanism.
A delivery mechanism engineered to extract maximum profit.
It changes absolutely nothing about the fact that All Too Well contains some of the sharpest, most devastating lyricism of the 21st century. The emotional truth of her heartbreak survives the corporate machinery.
I disagree entirely.
The fact that millions of people bought it doesn't mean it was manufactured to manipulate them. It means her deeply personal, terrifyingly specific pain happened to be universally understood. The art survives the business.
The art doesn't survive the business. The art is the business. Your authentic pain was exactly the product being manufactured, packaged, and scaled for mass consumption.
It was real emotion.
Without the Papa John's boxes, the Max Martin Pop Factory hooks, the Target exclusives, and the gamified liner notes driving physical sales, your sacred masterpiece wouldn't be a generational touchstone at all. It would be a footnote. The Heartbreak was just the raw material. The machine is what made it matter.